Hey, how does it change for you, or does it change much at all? Picking 15th rather than much higher in the draft order. Is it one of the just going after the best player at this point, or how did things change much?
Um, doesn't change dramatically. Uh, there's, I guess, less certainty the farther back in the draft you go. There's a little less certainty as to who's going to be there. Or there may be more options or maybe not, depending on how it plays out. As far as I think we're still in that phase of taking the best prospect. Having said that, if you have two that are relatively equal, maybe we look at or two or three potentially that are equal that we look at need maybe. So we'll take that into a little bit more consideration. But I think Ted will ultimately take what we feel the best prospect is.
Hey, the way the calendar fell this year? What, you only have like 1 day, 1 or 2 days before free agency starts. How much of a has that been a little bit of a hassle, or can it be a bit of a hassle with so little time between the two?
Yeah. I honestly, it's not ideal. It's something we've talked about, a lot at with the league. They're aware of that. It's a busy time for everyone, and potentially even the for the league themselves, and obviously for Edmonton and Florida, depending on what happens tonight, they could be going into Friday, which would be a great situation. We'd all love to have that issue, but things are really, really condensed, and I'm hopeful at some point we can alter our schedule for everybody, for the teams, for the league, that we can spread things out a little bit. Yeah, it's just it was the same thing last year. I think it's been the last couple of years. The same thing. The draft was in Nashville on Saturday, and everybody trying to get home for free agency period. A lot of teams, including ourselves, will on the Sunday we'll have our development camps. A lot of the younger players, prospects coming in for that, and it's a very busy time. We had a difficult time due to weather last year. Teams getting out, people actually getting out of Nashville and getting back in time. So I'm hopeful at some point it can be addressed, and whether it's and move some of these dates around, free agency, the draft or something. I would really, selfishly, would I think I'll speak for all the teams that if we had more time just to spread this out. There's a lot going on.
And last one, just the fact next year you guys are going to be doing in your war rooms, I guess. I think you've kind of said it before. You kind of almost prefer that way a little bit, or what, being that rather
Yeah,
than being all at one site.
yeah, I personally do. I'm not sure everybody feels the same way. You talk to other managers around the league. They have their own preferences. There is some benefits or conveniences of being all in one place at the same time. But just personally, I like being in the room with our staff. It's a little quieter, a little less noise. You're not necessarily, even just walking by another table, you want to have a conversation. You feel like you're spying a little bit. Just a lot going on, and I'd rather much rather just be in our own room. No, we do need to work out. I don't know how it came across on TV, but from our end, there's delays with um, 8-second delays or whatever. I didn't was so it's kind of you're not as much in the first round, but in the second and third, you do take a lot of calls. Teams are looking to move up and move back and acquire picks, and you think you have time, and you realize you've got the thing on TV, and you're working on real time, and next thing you know, it's like, oh, I gotta go. We're making a pick. It's too late to make a deal. So there's some things that need to be worked out doing this thing remotely, but personally, I like just having everything out. Our staff here in one room. It's quieter. We got everything laid out all in front of us, and I mean, you're there at the draft. You see how there's 20 people crammed around that table, and it's just like not ideal. So,
Thanks for this, Steve.
yep.
Elaine?
Steve, first of all, thank you for scheduling this around Euro Cup matches. I appreciate that. And I'll be done writing by the time France and the Netherlands play, I hope. Anyway, how much does
Elaine? Who's gonna win?
I'm gonna go with France. How much does depth factor in? I mean, when you make your first pick, especially, I mean, you've got
Sorry, how much does what? Sorry.
depth in the farm system factor in when you make your first pick. You might look at, you've got some very promising young defensemen, kind of depth in that area. You've also picked centers in the past couple of drafts. Like, how much does what you have in the farm system already factor into when you make your decision?
How much? I'm not sure, but we definitely are taking that into consideration for sure. Not, and even maybe it's, I'm not going to sit here and tell you we're definitely not taking a defenseman in the first round, but potentially, like, we look at, hey, whatever you do in the first round or second round, maybe it's time to start. We need to address some other areas. So, we're looking at that 15th pick. That's still a pretty high pick. It's important that we get a good player. It's important that we get a player that honestly that plays for us in the NHL. We need that, and it's not as simple as we all think, or it's not as automatic maybe as we all like to think it is. So it's important that we get a player. So I think when you're picking high, you want to make sure you get a good prospect regardless of the position. That I think over the course of each draft, we have to really start to be thinking about, okay, like, one, sometimes it can more so with goaltenders, but in some positions, guys that are starting to look at, these kids are looking at depth charts, and as they're playing in college maybe, or playing in Europe, saying, you know what, I may just let my rights expire and choose a team. So yeah, I think you have to take into consideration how many prospects you have at each position, because ultimately they've got to, when they turn pro, you got to find a spot for them to play. Not as big an issue with forwards. Goaltenders for sure, it's a concern, because generally teams have 5, maybe 6 within their system. So you factor that in. Forwards, it's a little bit more flexibility.
Just while we have you, both Dylan Larkin and Alex Lyon had injuries before during the World Championship. What can you give us a little update on their status? Like,
yeah, Dylan ultimately didn't go. He had an injury, an upper body injury that he was dealing with late in the season that didn't really, think a lot. And then, the end of the season, we do all of our testing, and they get whatever scans and x-rays and things. And he had to address that with I don't want to call it minor surgery, but he had to have surgery. I expect he's training. I don't believe he's skating or shooting pucks yet, but expect him to be 100% and ready to go for training camp. Alex, at the World Championship, suffered a cut on his finger. I think there might have been some minor, laceration to the tendon, one of the tendons, but nothing that required surgery, and will heal fine. And I don't expect either of those to be an issue once the season starts.
Okay, and Leslie, just when we spoke in April, there were several free agents that you hope to re-sign. Where kind of are you with those? And it's super hard to build a contender, right? But I think you set expectations high after coming down to game 82, that you missed the playoffs this season. Going into next season, there's going to be greater expectation on, like, how much pressure is it to get somebody like a Patrick Kane or a Shane Gostisbehere re-signed, or just in general, really have a good free agency in terms of, you're going into the draft, that's for the future, but just addressing, the team as it is right now.
Well, I would agree. I think there's more expectations for our team next year. Going into free agency, we're ultimately, I'm going to stick to the plan, and we are trying to build a team that's not just going to make the playoffs one year and maybe not the next year. So we're going to continue. I don't know what word to use, disciplined, use whatever word you want, good or bad. We're going to stick with it. And our goal is to build a team that can be sustainable, be a playoff contender. And we'll stick with that. We'll continue in free agency, to whether it's with our own free agents or others, to be selective and try to address certain needs regarding our own individual, both restricted and unrestricted free agents. been in contact with everyone. Obviously, you've read the only player we've signed so far is Albert Johansson. We have restricted free agents with no arb rights. We have restricted free agents with arb rights, and then we have our unrestricted. And we won't be able to sign all of our unrestricted free agents. I can't even guarantee we'll sign any of them, but we have interest in signing them. And ultimately, it becomes again, it's going to come down to term and dollars. We have to make this all fit. As you know, I think it's safe to say Lucas and Moritz Seider will their contracts are going to go up significantly, and that's going to take up a major portion of our cap. And I have to be aware of that, and I have to plan for that. So that'll limit what we can do in other areas.
So do you call it the Yzer plan as well, or?
Pardon me?
Do you call it the Yzer plan as well?
Yeah, I don't really use that term. So,
all right, France, and Netherlands. Who do you have?
Well, my name is Dutch, but I'm a Virgil van Dijk fan, but I think the French are too strong. So I'm with you.
Thanks so much, Steve.
Max?
Hey, Steve, you talked about the contracts for Lucas and Mo. Do you feel like that's something that if you don't have those deals done before the draft or July 1, like how much of an obstacle would that be for you guys to try to do your off season without those done, I guess?
I'm just going to have to work around it. Ultimately, I can't force anything. They'll get done in due time, and I'd prefer to have them done, but to be quite honest, I don't anticipate that happening at this stage. And we'll just work around it and make decisions along the way, fully aware of that we'll try to get them under contract or plan to get them under contract at some point. Yeah.
One thing I meant to ask you at the end of season 1, you guys signed Justin Hall last summer, and I think he ended up playing in less than half the games for you guys. How do you kind of view, the way he was used this year, and what do you kind of foresee his role as here going forward?
Well, I'll go back last summer on July 1. We wanted to get at least a right shot defenseman. We know obviously we had Mo there. We wanted to get a right shot defenseman. Our young guys, Sen and Pelika, we felt that, is he 1, 2, 3 years away? I'm not sure. So in the interim, Antti Tuomisto was in Grand Rapids. We're anticipating, him needing some time in the minors. So on July 1, we signed Justin Hall. And then we signed Shane Gosses-Behere, who's a left shot, and kind of felt like, wow, we have 7 defensemen. And we were comfortable with that 7 and figuring, guys get injured. We're not going to worry about it. The coaches may have some decisions to make periodically, but we'll let that sort itself out. And then as the summer went on, and then we were able to acquire, our team looked somewhat competitive, and we were able to acquire Jeff Petrie for a 4th round pick. We thought, at 1/4 of his cap number, we thought that was, that's good value. It's a player that's going to help us with depth. And again, you need it. You need depth in goal. You need depth in defense. Injuries happen. Well, as the season went on, we stayed relatively healthy on the blue line. I think only a couple of guys missed a game or 2 here and there. There wasn't a lot of injury, and our coaches decided to go with on the right side with Jeff Petrie, and ultimately to use Shane on the right side as well. And he was an important, as part of the power play. So that pushed Justin Hall down on the depth chart. Wasn't necessarily the plan going in. He's an NHL defenseman. I'm not sure we'll go back with the same group of D-men next year, but Justin was a good player in the NHL, and will be. Just didn't get opportunity, and we had some depth, and we didn't have injuries, and our coaches, trying to win games, went with the lineups they thought would give us the best chance to win. And as of now, you see what our roster looks like on the blue line. I still I've had talks, and we'll continue to talk with Shane's agent here. Haven't ruled that out. We would like to try and figure something out. But in order to do that, we're, as I said, we've got potentially Simon and Albert Johansson. We got to make room for those guys and figure out a way to do that.
And then what was your kind of read on what you saw from the Griffins in the playoffs? Anybody really stand out to you?
You know what? I thought the team in general played well. I'm hesitant just to give you a name or two because I don't want to miss anybody. But overall, I thought the guys played pretty well. There's a few younger and veteran guys I was disappointed with, but in general, I thought the team played pretty good, and it was exciting. And we ran out of gas a little bit in the Milwaukee series. Which was a series. Milwaukee's a good team and big, strong team, but I think we were in a position to win that series. I was a little disappointed that we weren't able to see it through, but overall, I was very pleased with the season that the Griffins had in general, the job that Dan and his staff did there, and the development of our young players, excuse me, and the leadership and on and off the ice by the the veterans on that team. So it was a good year in Grand Rapids overall.
Thanks, Steve.
Rachel from CBS.
Hi, Steve. Rachel Hotmeyer, new with CBS Detroit. I wanted to start with where you are at in the draft. With plenty of draft capital this year and beyond, I'm curious how willing or intentional you would be to move up or down in the draft in order to make a trade happen.
That's really something that kind of happens on the draft. Like I'm not in a big hurry to be trading our in particular our first round selection or our first round pick. I would be open to it, but I want to do that. We traded a first round pick actually in this year's draft for Alex DeBrincat last summer. It turned out to be a late first that Ottawa has. So I'm not afraid of doing that, but I don't anticipate at this stage us making a trade for a player that would involve the 15th pick. Moving up or down, we look at the teams that are around us. We contact them to in advance just to say what's your level of interest in moving up or moving down, and we all kind of say the same thing. We'll just say we'll see how it plays out on the floor, and those decisions happen really like 2 or 3 picks before yours is coming up. So Rachel, we explore every opportunity, and then ultimately it's a kind of a real decision to be made on the floor. But what I would say at this stage, I don't anticipate or I wouldn't expect any like blockbuster trades from Detroit involving the 15th pick today. There's not really that opportunity out there for us.
Sure, I hear you. And if I have to ask, just given the conversations you are in right now, where do things stand with Patrick Kane?
I've talked with Pat Brisson, who represents Patrick. We've talked again with all of our free agents, not just Patrick, and explain my situation and have a feel for what they're thinking of. And we just pretty much all agreed, let's stay in touch. And this is a busy week, not just a busy week for the draft, but a busy week trying to see if we can't put some of these pieces in place.
Well, thank you.
Sam.
Steve, you mentioned at the end of the season that with prospects, there's not a ton of point in thinking about who exactly they might play with 2 or 3 years down the road because so much can change in that duration. But I'm curious, as you go through the kind of evaluation, draft, and then development process, at what stage in that does it become appropriate to start thinking about the exact role someone might play by the time they do reach the NHL level?
It's a good question. As far as line combinations and things like that, that just kind of evolves, and ultimately kind of comes down to coaches' decisions. And so we just let the players play. We the more we see them, today that we're looking at the kids for this year's draft, for example, and whoever it is, we project this player to be a top 4 D-man, a power play guy, or this guy, we think he's got a chance to be a middle 6 winger that's going to score some goals. It changes, better or worse, as with each year they grow. We have a certain idea of what they're going to be. And just with our own players, we're looking at, you know, a Nate Danielson turning pro this year, a Marco Casper, even Simon Edmondson, Albert Johansson's, as they evolve each year, they mature. One, obviously our hope is that they're going to play in the NHL. That's our baseline, that they're going to play. And then are they going to be third pairing guys? Will they be able to kill penalties? Do we see them playing on the power play? It just kind of evolves, and we kind of make our estimations or plan it as we move along. But as far as going into the draft, again, we're just looking, like it's stating the obvious. We're just looking for kids that we think are really good prospects, who we think are going to be really good players, and what role they eventually fall into. It works itself out. Generally, like, you know, if guys are scorers, and if guys aren't scorers in junior and whatnot, they probably don't become big scorers in the NHL, where that's very deceiving as you look at a lot of the European kids who might be playing in men's league, who don't put up any numbers at all. And some of them become big scorers and some of them don't. So I wish we knew which ones were and which ones weren't. We'd be more accurate in the draft. So Sam, I don't think I'm doing a good job of answering your question, but you know, as they get older and closer to playing in the NHL, we have a better idea of where they're going to fit and what we think they're going to be at the NHL level.
Thank you.
Sean Shapiro.
Hey, Steve, with kind of on that note of figuring out some kids in Europe and everything like that, I know we're still in the kind of the weird, murky area with players coming out of Russia. And I know the Russian kids weren't allowed to be at the combine. Some teams had a harder time. How did you guys, and I know there's a camp going on in Florida right now that you guys have probably checked out with some Russian kids down there. How did you guys kind of manage keeping tabs on that? And I know this is a challenge for everyone right now going into this draft.
Yeah. Well, the Russian, we have a scout in Russia. He's there. He's Russian. He knows the players. He does all of our legwork in Russia. Gets to know the players on and off the ice. We're as a league, we're fortunate, or as I guess in the world with the internet now, and that we can virtually get every single game. It's not ideal. But we can get any game and watch these kids play. We can watch just their shifts. We can watch anything and specify it. So that's very helpful. The biggest downside to it is you don't get to see them come out of Europe, come out of Russia and play in the international tournament. So we get to see all the kids head to head in their same age group. Gives you a better idea. So it's a little bit more of a projection with the Russian players, because you're not seeing them in different environments. Some of them will be at the draft. You'll get a chance to meet them there. As you mentioned, there was a camp in Florida this week, and Chris Draper was down there, got a chance to meet the kids a little bit, and they did some testing on and off ice. I don't think the on ice part, you're going to get a lot from that. It's kind of shinny hockey like that in the summertime, but you get to see the kids, you get to see them move on the ice, and then most importantly, honestly, it's you kind of get to size them up and simply say, hey, geez, that kid's big, looks like he's an athlete, looks like he's going to grow. That's about as exact as we're getting here, and it's not ideal, but you make it work.
This next one's kind of fresh in the market right now. There's Markstrom moves to New Jersey. There's the LA makes a trade involving a goalie. You mentioned Alex coming back. You had Ville missed most of the year with injury. How do you kind of now, as you go into the goalie market, when you look at kind of your stable of things, for example, how does Sebastian's showing in Grand Rapids impact all of that as you head into July 1st with all of those?
Well, yeah, first of all, we expect Ville to be 100% ready to go at the start of training camp. I can't predict future injuries. We're hopeful that he's healthy, but we will certainly look with both Alex and Ville with 1 year to go on their contracts. We certainly have the option of extending them. Ville's season was kind of a write-off just due to injury, and we can't be overly critical of that. It happens, and we don't like it. Ville doesn't like it. We don't like it, but it happens. So we're hoping he rebounds, and when he's been healthy, he's been good for us. So, and Alex, I think, played a bigger role than any of us expected, and he and James were part of the reason we were in the playoff race down the stretch. So I will we will look at the goalie market. And if there's if something makes sense for us to do that we think improves us, whether that be via trade or free agency, we're not opposed to doing that. I know we have two, but I think I do know we need to try to see if we can't improve our team. But having said that, I don't anticipate, I don't, anticipate using prime assets, whatever you'd consider those to be, to really go out and acquire, like, say, an older goaltender that might not be here in 2, 3, 4 years from now.
Then last one for me. There's one of the other things in the past couple of weeks has been the Washington Capitals going by CapFriendly, which was for a lot of us the most public kind of resource of how we tracked where everything was. And we heard stories of how some teams were using them on the back end and more worried about how they moved and everything like that. From what you can or are willing to tell me, how often did you guys use that as a resource? What's kind of, for as far as a Red Wings perspective, is that something that I've heard some teams used it as a resource, others just had their everything back of house? Just from what you're willing to share with me, what can you tell me about your
certainly go on CapFriendly. It's easy. You just click on their website, and it's not necessarily like there's not all the information we need there, but it's a simple thing to look through and see what a player's contract status is, what their cap situation is. But the league provides us all that information. We have the league website, which is I assume is accurate, that we really work off. It's just going to create, I'm sure somebody's going to come up with a new something different, but we're going to manage without it. But it certainly was very convenient and helpful to us. But we have access to all that information, every team's current situation, their status, their daily, what players are being assigned, and whether they were counted on the NHL cap that day or they were on their American League or whatnot. We have all that information and that it's accurate. So regarding our own team, we do our own thing, obviously, and we should know that. It's a little bit more work now, maybe on a per day basis to gather a little bit of information, but it's not going to cripple us all. But it was a great website.
Yeah, thanks, Steve.
Kevin Allen.
Hi, Steve. Just a follow-up to Sean's goaltending question. Do you anticipate, last year was special circumstances, you ended up with three goalies at the NHL level. Do you anticipate a more traditional 2 goalie system? And then if so, would you then be looking for like a veteran guy to be with Kosa down in Grand Rapids, or have you decided how that's all going to work out?
We've had a lot of discussions on it, Kevin, which way we go with it. We will definitely want another a goaltender, say if you want to call it a number 3, whether he's a veteran. I define a veteran, but another guy that in the event we have an injury up top or we need a goalie for whatever reason, that we have someone there. Again, just regarding Sebastian, he had a very good year. We're very pleased with his progress. I don't rule out any player coming to training camp and standing on his head or playing brilliantly and force us to reevaluate our plan. But right now, I anticipate Sebastian playing and playing an even bigger role in Grand Rapids next year. And so that we'll look to add a goaltender there. And I don't see us like really doing 3 goaltenders throughout the course of the season. That wasn't really the plan last year either. But injury kind of dictated that, and we kind of hemmed and hawed a little bit at the end of the season as far as, okay, what do we want to do? And then Billy got hurt, and it kind of the issue was resolved. But again, we'll I wouldn't say 100% no, but the 3 goaltenders, and talking with our guys when they're all healthy, 1, they want to play, and 2, they're used to having in practice, they're used to having the net now. Back when and maybe even into the 90s, a lot of teams carried 3, and it was just the way it was. And wasn't an issue. Most of the goalies didn't want to practice anyway. So, now they're not used to having it. So it's a little bit different, it's a little bit different in their rhythm, but ultimately it's an important position. And if we were to go and say get another goaltender, we'll figure it out as we move along.
And at the end of the AHL playoff run of the Griffins, Simon Edvinsson got hurt. Is that anything to be concerned about, or?
No, he was fine. He left pretty quickly after to go home. There was no issues.
Yeah. And then with Edvinsson, there's always a tendency, I think, when you get especially an early draft pick like he was, when he comes up and we had all watched him play, that maybe the fan base will have little unreasonable expectations. If presumably he makes the team, what's a reasonable expectation for a player of his ability in his first full season, if that occurs?
Well, my hope would be that he's a regular, based on how he was used down the stretch and in pretty important games for us. And he did reasonably well. My expectation is for him to do more. I think he can do more. But I think it's reasonable to expect him to play a regular shift, or that would be our hope, and to participate on the penalty killings group, and potentially, depending on what we do on the depth chart and how everyone performs, maybe see some PP time. That was his role in Grand Rapids. But having said that, he's not going to be handed anything, and Simon needs to know he's going to have to work for it and earn it every shift. He has the ability to do it, and it's up to him to do it. And he's going to have to do it.
And finally, you've been drafting much earlier in the draft than this, but now that you're at 15, you don't know exactly who will be available, but you have a general idea of the talent that will be available then. Are you still reasonably excited about getting a good player there? I mean, what's that grouping look like?
Well, I'm fully expecting to get a very good prospect, and I'm hopeful that prospect turns into a very good player one day. So, we feel good. It's always every position we're picking at, there's this group of guys. We really need to get one of these guys. We need to draft the fall this way to get one of these guys. Usually there's one there, and there's a group of them this year. I think it's fair to say every year is pretty much unpredictable. Maybe outside of number one, some years one is unpredictable. It hasn't really been lately. It doesn't seem to be this year. After that, there's a lot of players that could go in a different order, and they're all pretty darn good. And that's where we sit there at 15 and say, you know what, I'm not sure which one of these guys, but we'll be very happy if we get any of them. It might be a forward, it might be a D-man, whatnot. So we're we're more than comfortable sitting where we are, and very confident that we're going to get a prospect that will be on our team one day and have a positive impact for us.
Thanks, Steve.
Ansar?
Yeah, hi, Steve. I think you mentioned at the end of the season, just the general trend in the league seems to be more offensive, more goals being scored. Just wondering, does that in any way change your approach in the draft as far as the top end of what type of players you're looking for?
No. One thing I'm trying to give our amateur staff kind of, I guess, my direction or my philosophy, feelings on players, what attributes I think we want to emphasize. And for them, let's be consistent. We're not going to get it right every time, but if we're consistent in knowing the type of people and the type of traits or strengths or whatnot that each player has, we'll build a team that we're happy with, and we'll get it right more often. If you're constantly changing and trying to keep up with the times, and the game is constantly evolving, and you have to be aware of that. But I believe there's certain traits that are going to make, in any era, the great players had these traits, and they'll adjust to whatever way the game is played. So we're going to stick with kind of what our beliefs are, and our staff. It's, we've had some changes on our staff in the 5 years, and it takes time for them to really become a team, understand what we're trying to do, what works and doesn't work, and for a lot of trust to be in there and everyone. And I'm really pleased with the staff that Chris has put together and confident in these people, that they're knowledgeable, they have good judgment, and we'll continue to stick with kind of our values maybe in what we see in prospects.
Also, a couple of young forwards who seem to be getting fairly close, Casper and Carter Mazer. Can you just comment on what you've seen from them this year and what you're hoping to see from them in training camp?
Well, both of those players had very good seasons. Marco's play just got stronger and stronger as the year went on. He's a real good two-way player. The offense started to generate more offense, and particularly in the playoffs. He goes to the net hard. He's strong on the puck. He's strong defensively as a centerman. We're really pleased with his development. The same with Carter Mazer, as we've talked about him before. He's got a real good feel for the game. He's a winger. He knows how to get open. He knows where to go. He goes to all the hard areas, and he gets a puck on a stick and off the stick. And it's, a little bit like the Brinkett shot. It's a threat. When they shoot the puck, it's a threat to go in. He's got that every time he shoots it, it's a scoring chance. So really, Carter, he just needs to, just to fill out, get a little bit stronger. And, but both are really good young prospects for us, both with good attitudes, and both, their numbers weren't off the charts in the minors this year, but if you watch their progression at the end of the season, you're like, these two kids are really good prospects.
Thanks, Steve.
Art.
Hi, Steve.
Hey, Art.
Until Mo and Lucas are signed, how frustrating is it for you? Aren't you kind of almost caught between a rock and a hard place? Because, you like to maneuver. I mean, you have a history of doing that, but yet until those two guys are signed, is it difficult for you to carry out what you want to do this offseason?
Well, no, I'm definitely not frustrated. I just understand the process. I've had very good dialogue with both of their agents. Would I love to have deals done now? Yeah, make it things a little bit easier, not necessarily easier, but clearer. I don't know what will happen in free agency. Kind of have ideas, thoughts of things that we'd like to do. And that is, part of that is okay with Lucas and Mo signed at particular ranges, I'll say. And if they're not signed and there's still moves that we really think are important for us, that makes sense, we're going to do that, and we'll adjust. We potentially have to adjust the negotiation plan with those guys after the fact, if that's the case. But we will try to do things that, improve our team and, give us a better chance next year. But I anticipate getting both of them signed. I don't have a timeline for it. I don't control that. I can only do my part. But again, the dialogue has been good, and we'll continue to work towards it. And we'll plan accordingly, but we may have to adjust on the fly.
When you look at the way the negotiations are going, I'm under the assumption you would like to get both of those guys signed for 8-year contracts, sign them long term. But are you prepared to bridge them if it comes down to that? I mean, would you rather not do that, but is that kind of an option for you?
I don't, Art, I don't really want to get into, or I won't get into the terms or anything like that. Again, both JP Barry regarding Lucas and Claude Lemieux representing Mo. We've had a lot of discussions, and we keep those between us, and we look at a lot of different things, and we'll figure something out along the way here. But ultimately, I think it's safe to say both parties really have a tremendous interest in getting something, and it just takes time. And it's unfortunately, it's common. You see it with a lot of the higher profile, maybe restricted free agents out of this age group. Sometimes it takes longer than others. And we'll just continue to work towards getting something done.
every year that we do the pre-draft presser, I always ask you this question. And at 15, there's, as you just said, there seems to be maybe a lot of options for the Red Wings on this table. And we've always talked about trying to find a pure goal scorer. And I'm under the impression that it seems, and I was at all the Grand Rapids playoff games, saw some regular season games. Nate and Marco look like great players, very good two-way players, responsible, have some offensive upside, yet that's still pure goal scorer. If it comes down to 3 or 4 options, will Steve Yzerman sit there as he's sitting in the sphere being overwhelmed by everything that's going on in Las Vegas? Will you just say to yourself, hey, I don't care who scored the most goals. That's the guy that we're going to take a flyer on this kid. Let's just do it. I mean, could that be an option?
Well, I don't foresee us taking a flyer on anybody at that point.
Okay, all right.
All
right.
Take a flyer in the 7th round.
But I mean, somebody who has a proven record, at least as a goal scorer.
Proven record. Proven record proven record in the NHL is the ones that matter the most.
Well, right, I know that, but I mean, and I know you want that to translate. I mean, I understand the whole process, but I'm just saying, has it gotten to a point now where you're at an age saying, I got to get some young kid that can score consistently, and this might be our best option where we're at right now as an organization?
Possibly.
So, all right. And my final question is this: how ridiculous is it that the Stanley Cup could be awarded on June 24th? I mean, hasn't this been too long?
Well, Art, if the Red Wings were playing in it, I'd be more than happy to be playing on June 24th. I can't be critical of the league in this matter. Like, I think, our league is really growing. There's a lot of popularity, gaining a lot of attention. Yeah, it's late June. We debate, in the fall, do we want to start earlier? Do we want to start later? You look at golf has changed their schedule around. Football has played such a college and NFL are such a big factor in the fall in the sports world for not only simply for ticket sales, but also for TV whatnot. So there's a debate a lot within the league about when do we start the schedule, when do we finish the schedule. So it kind of is what it is, and Gary Bettman and his staff, they spend a lot of time looking at this, and they don't just throw these dates out there. There's a lot that goes into it. So again, I'm not going to be critical of it. I would be thrilled to be playing on June 24th for the Stanley Cup. That's the our league has evolved, and our league is I believe is doing extremely well. As the entire sports world seems to be doing really well right now, but I think we're all happy with the NHL. Would we start sooner and be able to end it sooner? Might be good, but again, things are good. I got to assume, ratings for this series are good, even not being like the big Toronto's, New York's, the huge markets. I got to think because the hockey's been really, really entertaining.
Great. Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it as always.
Bob, go ahead.
Yeah, Steve, you mentioned your free agents, and you may not end up signing any of them depending on circumstances. But you look at some of the guys that are UFAs, between, like, for instance, Kane, Sprong, and Perron, that's about 40 goals right there. How do you, if you don't get those guys, I guess, A, how do you replace those goals? And B, how long can you wait for the guys that you want to bring back to make up their mind before you have to look elsewhere?
Bob, we do the exact same thing, thinking that, okay, this player scored this many goals, we need to score. Who's going to provide that production for us? And these are all thoughts that are going through okay, if we don't bring this player back, or we can't bring this player back, who's going to replace that production? And potentially, we may not be able to equal it out goal for goal, so to speak, or maybe we will look back and we may get more goals. I don't know. We didn't necessarily won last July 1st. I didn't anticipate Patrick Kane being on the Red Wings. Something may come along different than expected. So it definitely is something that we pay attention to as well. And if it can't be done with our own free agents, we'll try to address it out there in the market and see where it goes. So, but obviously it's a concern for sure. And we talk about replacing the goals. The thing we also need to do is cut down on the goals against too, which will make us more competitive. So if we can find some sort of balance, we'd hope to do that and remain competitive.
I also want to ask you about Jake Walman. He started out last season in your top defense pairing, and I know injuries were a factor, but toward the end of the season, he was often the odd man out or in the third pairing. I just wondering going forward where his place is in the organization.
Yeah, well, again, it's similar to Justin Holl. Like during the season, it was a bit of a rotation, and Oli Mata was a healthy scratch a lot of nights. And Oli Mata is a really good defenseman. As the season went on, I think a lot of our guys are play. I don't want to single out any individual one, but a lot of our play was a little bit up and down. And the coaches made some changes to the pairings, and Ben Sherratt went up with Seider and played with Mo, and they were pretty effective down the stretch. Jake was battling a muscle injury, and he was playing, and he was struggling with that, and finally came out, and Oli went in, and Oli was really solid, and the coaches selected to go with again the six of God, who was it on our left side? It was Sherratt, Simon, and Oli, and then on the right side it was Ghost, Jeff Petrie, and Mo. And we had the fortune of having what we considered 8 NHL defensemen. And unfortunately, when everybody's healthy, somebody's sitting out, and that's kind of what happened down the stretch for Jake. So he'll, depending on what we do or don't do this summer, he'll be back in competition for, ice time like they all are. So, it's, I guess we're fortunate in some ways. We have depth on the blue line. Might have to tweak things a little bit. We'll see how it plays out here in the next, I would say the next few weeks, but it might be over the course of the summer.
Thanks, Steve.
Yep.
Last question will go to Carlos.
Yeah, Steve, you said you want to be a consistent playoff team. That's what you're building for, not just a, one and done kind of a team. How we see what number one picks like McDavid have done, Stamkos obviously down at Tampa. How likely is it that you can be that consistent playoff team, cup contender without a number one pick, an elite like high draft pick like that?
Yeah, well, I think, Carlos, I do believe you can. Like, first of all, Connor McDavid is putting himself into that level, like to see the numbers he's doing now. He's putting himself in the conversation with Wayne Gretzky, Bobby Orr, Mario Lemieux. That's the best players of all time. Those guys rarely come along. And there's you look some of these teams, with Dallas or whatnot. Jim Nill has just quietly gone about building an excellent team, and actually has some high picks on there. He got, Heiskanen was number 4, but Tyler Seguin was number 2, but with a different organization. So I do think you can build a really good team. I really do. I'd love to have a Connor McDavid. I'm not sure exactly how I can go about doing that, but I think you can build a really good team. I really do. And you have to, I want to say draft well. We also have to get a little bit lucky, because if these guys are superstars and you're picking them 15th, they probably should have been 1 or 2, and you look at some kids even go in the second round, and it was a great pick. If we knew he was going to be that good, we would have picked him in the first round. So, Carlos, I really do believe we can build it. And ultimately, we do check every year, whether we've been picking 4th or 6th or 8th and 15th. Check with these teams at the top of the draft. Hey, I want your pick. How do I get your pick? What do you want for your pick? And 99% of the answer has been, we have no interest in moving our pick. We're using it, particularly with 1, 2, and 3. It just hasn't happened for us. And I tried in the past, and I'm okay with it. Like Lucas at 4, we're really pleased. Mo at 6, we're really pleased with that. We think Simon's going to be a good player. We think Marco's going to be a good player. Mate, like, are they going to be superstars? Maybe. But I think they're going to be really good players, and we're going to have the nucleus of a team. My hope is, at the worst, we have a nucleus of really good players that is going to give us that consistency. The downside of having superstars is they get paid a lot of money, and you got cap issues with those guys. So there's no perfect way, I believe, of building a really good team. And if you're going to put big money into the top end guys, then you got to go out and find really good value to fill out the rest of your lineup. And you need those stars to stay healthy, or you have a good team and maybe you don't have the money in the superstar, and it allows you to build a little bit more depth.
And just my other question here is just, you were asked about the Yzer plan. You're 5 years in now. When you were in Tampa, 5 years in there, you guys were lifting the cup. How do you feel the Yzer plan's going with the Red Wings so far, 5 years in?
Well, I don't use the term the Wiser plan or Yzer plan, just so you know, whoever coined that phrase, I don't use it. My plan has been as simple as, look, I'm going to try and build a good team through the draft. That's going to take time. I'm going to do my best and to acquire more picks, high picks. That's been a challenge for us to do. But we have used some draft picks. Only, I think, if off the top of my head, just the one first to acquire Alex DeBrincat. And I'm going to stick with that. At some point, we need to make a move. This situation compared to Tampa is a little bit different. Again, when I think I got there in 2010, they ultimately, I think we got to the Stanley Cup Finals in 2015. You had, I guess, going back to your original point or question, they had already had the first and the second pick in the draft. They acquired they got Stamkos and Hedman, and part of the allure of going down there was, my God, they got those two pieces to build around. They've had to do the suffering to get that. That's a good starting point, and they had some pretty darn good veterans there as well. So, little different situation starting off. But I can't say, like, 5 years in that I'm thrilled with exactly all the decisions I made or how things have played out. But we're going to stick with or I'm planning to stick with what we're doing. We're constantly looking at trying to get an advantage to try and whether it's acquire a player in a trade or do things. And that's been challenging, but I also understand it. Just nobody wants to hear it. It just takes time. It takes a long time, and we're sticking with it. And I'm hopeful that somehow in the next couple of years, this nucleus of relatively young players that we have, starting with the DeBrincats and Larkins, who are maybe our older young guys, along with the Edmondsons, the Siders, Raymonds, Danielsons, Kaspers, Carter Mazer, Sen and Pelika, whoever we get this year. All of a sudden, we have that group of 12 guys that are 21 to 29, and that's our group for that playoff window. And still, I don't think we're quite there yet. I'm hopeful that we're competitive, can compete for a playoff spot this year again as well.